Now I did mention that to run this we have to do something else actually. We can't just use Mongo just directly like this in the code. We have to actually run a connection to Mongo. So similar to SQL, you have to connect to the database using a port and connection. So if you open things like on Windows or Macs, you could open your terminal or console, as you might call it, on a Windows machine, and you have to go to where you've installed your Mongo. So remember I mentioned that you should install Mongo. Or on actually a Mac, you probably don't need to do this. Or if you've referenced somehow installation, you probably don't need to do it. But in my case, all I have to do is type mongod. So there's a command called mongod that should be installed once you've installed Mongo. Mongod basically creates or allows the database to have a connection, which we can then communicate to directly using our code. So if we type mongod, we should now establish a connection, and you'll see a bunch of things going on with initialization of database structure, basically, and creating a connection. So it's initializing this connection, and it's going to allow us to communicate to Mongo. So now we can go back to our code and effectively run it, and that should now populate the data in the database in Mongo, and we're going to see that data in a moment. So let's go ahead and run it in Python. So if we go there, just press run in a Python run. So pydev run basically, and you see nothing is going to be indicated in the console. So this time we don't have any printout statements. So how do we know this is actually functioning? Well, we do have, if we open up a terminal window, probably a separate one than the one you just opened. So the other one you opened, as you can see, is engaged effectively. It's connected. And you can see it says one connection now open, so it should be connected to our code. And if you type in Mongo in a terminal window, or go to Mongo installation and type Mongo in the bin folder if you're using Windows, if you haven't referenced the installation path. So if you type Mongo, you will see that now we can basically look at the databases that we have by typing. Once we've opened Mongo, we can use a command called show dbs, which shows all databases in Mongo. You can see I have a number of databases. The one we've created is called test database, and you can see there's some data in there. So we've installed the data, or inputted the data, I should say, from what we did in the code that I showed you. So if we want to see that data, we can then say use test database. That should then switch us to that database. And then we can see the collections. So remember, the databases have something called collections. And we can see the collections we created, the posts and texts. So if I type db for database and then posts for the collection, I can type a command, say find one, which is a Mongo command, to see what kind of data I have. This should return one input that we've incorporated. This is just to test that actually there's data in there. We won't be doing any manipulation in Mongo natively. Of course you can, but in our case we won't. We're just going to simply look at to see that our data is there, and then any manipulation we'll do is going to occur on the Python side. So we don't need to do much in terms of Mongo kind of work, but we just want to make sure our data is actually there. So if I type find one, you'll see a bunch of things happening. That long sort of sequence of binary data is our image file, so that's why it's such a big sort of input. But if you go to the top, if you scroll to the top, there's actually other input that you'll notice. You have to kind of do it slowly. But in any case, there's other input you notice. For instance, you can see the author, the date. So that's some of the author and date information that we've installed. So if you go back to the create DB module, or rather the run Mongo module, you'll see that we have some inputs such as author, Mike, for instance. And there's some other date information that we've also installed. For instance, the date 7/14 there, 2016, and then 7/14, 2019. So that kind of dates we've installed. So that basically means we have now data in our module, or rather in our database called test database, and in a collection, in both collections called tests and posts. And if we want to believe that posts there, we could also use posts. So we can say use posts, for instance, db posts find one. Oops. Use test. Show collections. Let's see what we have. So db text, I should say, find one. I forgot the name of the collection. So there you go. There's the text. So you can see that there's now information that we have in there. And then you can see there's a unique ID object created as well on the Mongo side.